Hello, my name is Julie, and today I am reading Mockingjay for the first time since I was 11 years old. If you're watching this video, I sure hope you've watched my last two videos in which I read The Hunger Games and Catching Fire and compared them to those movies, and today we are doing the exact same thing with Mockingjay before I read the prequels for the very first time and watch the movies for the very first time. So, as always, I am going to be doing a reading vlog of my thoughts throughout the book, the reading experience, what I remembered or didn't remember from the first time, and then we're gonna watch the movie and see how these two compare to each other. But now, we've actually got two movies to watch, so we're gonna be talking for much longer. We don't need more ado. Let's just get going. Hello. We're cooking again.
Welcome to my kitchen.
I am having ribs for dinner. I'm so excited. I probably make myself ribs like once a year, and we're using my mom's recipe. I'm excited. I have not gotten very far into Mockingjay, but I already have so much to talk about because I think the beginning of this book is so freaking strong. Preheating the oven to 250, it's gonna go in there for 4 hours, so it's actually lunchtime right now. How would I describe the opening of Mockingjay? It is jarring, it is visceral, and it's almost a little bit scattered, but like jarring is the main word. We are really getting shocked into this entirely new situation. That is District 13, and it's not letting me cut into it, so I'm gonna get the scissors, which I now have to wash my scissors, which is always annoying. We start off just with Katniss walking through the ruins of District 12. The descriptions of these ruins are really strong. It's staccato, like I've said the previous books are in Katniss's descriptions of things, but now it is so much more scary, traumatic. She describes that she accidentally stepped on a rock and it turns out to be someone's skull. And then she describes that she's like choking on the ash. And the thing that upsets her is that she doesn't know who she's choking on. And that was like really, really hard to underline. I've been underlining a lot during this series. I underlined so much just in the first little bit of this. I'm like 65 pages into my copy that again has inflated font size. So this copy is like 450 pages when it normally should be like maybe under 400. And one of the major things that we're talking about in Mockingjay is Katniss and other characters no longer knowing what to believe. And it's introduced to us at first by Katniss describing the injury that she got when Joanna hit her with the coil and said she got a concussion from that. And the medication they are giving her is making her hallucinate. She describes that she thought like the floor was covered with snakes when she was healing up. That is something that we're going to get into more. Katniss has been kind of chomping at the bit to look at District 12, and she's allowed to go. Gale is like in a helicopter, and she is walking around reflecting on what has changed since we last saw her. But it's still summertime, so it's presumably been maybe a month since the end of Catching Fire. Maybe less than that, because of course we all know that Reaping Day is July 4th, right? She's talking about how this being in District 13 has let her be friends with Gale again, but what she isn't straight up mentioning is how that this is starting to bring conflict into her relationship with Gale. Because right off the bat, he ends up saving a lot of people. And because of that, he gets to be higher up in leadership. I didn't buy the regular barbecue sauce that I usually get. I guess I have to run to the store. When Katniss is walking around District 12, she talks about how she is so upset that any move she makes ends up with loss of life, is how she phrases it. She doesn't talk about how it's specifically people of her side. She talks about loss of life, which of course at this point, it has only been people on her side who are dying. Shortly after that, like maybe one conversation later, Gale says if he could push a button and kill everyone on the side of the Capitol, he would do it without hesitation. And we are really setting up what is going to be the conflict between Katniss and Gale here. We also have had Prim sort of be her own character for the first time. And she is already pretty insightful in that Katniss is a really important person to the revolution, and that she will be able to make demands of them because they want her to be the Mockingjay as a job physically. Which is interesting because we've basically only seen Prim in backstory and as like a character that we fawn over, but not really a character who actually has one-to-one conversations. And Katniss is starting to realize, hey, she's not that little girl as much anymore. She's starting to become her own person. She's very aware of the situation and aware of things that I'm not aware of. We get the first video from Peeta. The Capitol puts out a video of an interview with Caesar and Peeta trying to recap what happened at the end of the games and kind of put Peeta in a good light to the public as the Capitol has taken him. Katniss is pretty surprised because he actually talks about how it being in the games feels, because she says that no victors are allowed to talk about that. Peeta seems very healthy, extraordinarily healthy, but he starts getting angry whenever he's like talking about Katniss. He's like, obviously Katniss didn't know anything. Katniss didn't know anything. We didn't know anything. We were just trying to protect ourselves. And then at the very end, he calls for a ceasefire. And everybody's like, okay, they are feeding him lines. Katniss does not care that he is saying traitorous things because he knows he's being put up to it, because she is just happy he is alive and able to speak, is how she phrased it. We get this thing of her not knowing what to trust. She has these like grounding statements about who she is, and all of her stuff at the end is like about Peeta. Peeta has been taken. He may be a traitor, but I am still going to save him, and it's the last thing I do. But her family is safe in District 13 right now. So she says that the only thing that is keeping her fighting and wanting to be the Mockingjay is the fact that Peeta has been taken. Because what we see with Katniss kind of again and again is she is like a wild cornered animal. She will run and run and run and run away from a problem. Like her instinct all the time throughout this book has been, why don't we just run away? Why don't we just run away? She doesn't want to cause a fight. It's only when she's cornered that she ends up lashing out. She's like, I have to get Peeta out. So what can I do? And they purposefully make sure she watches that video so that she has the emotions in order to claim to be the Mockingjay, and she realizes that she can make some demands. But everyone that she talks to is like, are they actually going to hold to their side of the deal? District 13 is unlike anything we've read in the series so far. They are militant, specifically. District 13 was supposed to be nuclear weapons, but confirmed, Capitol and them do have nuclear weapons. And I do wonder, like, what do people from District 12 know about nuclear weapons? Like, what do they learn in school? But they are given very specific clothing they're supposed to wear that is all plain. They have a schedule that gets printed onto their arm every day of exactly where they're supposed to be and when. And everyone over the age of 14 is given the rank of soldier. And it is a very like strict hierarchical thing. There are like certain places you're not supposed to go. And once Plutarch and Fulvia, I believe her name is, who's Plutarch's assistant, which low-key, why is she here? Why isn't it just Plutarch? I think she's supposed to be like a Capitol stand-in of like a slightly more flighty person than Plutarch is. The group of them are ready to start doing the propaganda pieces, and they go down to this area that was called out for them to go. And it turns out they hear like whimpering behind a door, and they're told not to go in there. And it turns out that all of Katniss's makeup crew and such from the Hunger Games were brought in specifically to do Katniss's looks for the propaganda pieces. They had repeated offenses of stealing bread at mealtimes, and they were being tortured or at least being left alone in this prison cell. We're really getting this jarring feeling from the very beginning that District 13 is not good either. One of the very first things that Katniss says about District 13 is how much she hates them. I actually didn't remember her being so violently opposed to them right at the beginning. And I really appreciate that vibe because Katniss just has a really good censor of like what is right and wrong. Maybe not what person to trust. Katniss is such a good moral center for such a brutal story, and it's just going really, really well so far. I love the writing style and the way that Suzanne Collins is sort of making it feel piecemeal as Katniss like isn't experiencing time the same way that she used to because of her injuries and her trauma. I literally could not read anymore last night, and I can't wait to just do nothing but read tonight. And also eat ribs, I guess. Part 2 finishes up about twice where I am right now, so maybe I'll go a little bit further into part 2.
I think I did my math right. I think I'm 3/5 of the way through Mockingjay. Let me double check what the last thing that happened was, because it's been a couple hours. Ooh, Katniss is in District 2. What's been going on? So the last thing that I talked to you about, she had just gotten her dressing team. We have seen her go through the propos. We have seen the hospital get bombed. The deterioration of Peeta, and Peeta has now been rescued and of course has been hijacked. What do I want to talk about? I cannot believe how unputdownable this book is. Like, in a way that so few books I'm reading nowadays feel unputdownable. It's really only, like, favorite books I feel this way about. Like, I'm just kind of blown away that, like, oh, no, the quality is exactly what I remember. I do think that this feels like a more cohesive piece of work than Catching Fire does, because Catching Fire has the tricky job of having to take place over a longer period of time and like setting all these things up and everything, versus Mockingjay, like we are thrown into the situation we are going to be in from the beginning. And this book is so much more about antagonism with Gale than I remembered it being. And it's so great because I'm like, fuck Gale, man. I really appreciate that Suzanne Collins wrote a whole book about how, like, reckless revenge is not the answer. Let's talk about the propos, which I hate that word. I really do. Of course, what we've been saying this whole time and what we've understood about Katniss is this cornered animal thing. She cannot do things based off a script. And that's why Peeta is so effective, is he can make the things that he needs to say feel so emotional. He is just a very good speaker, and we actually overhear Coin saying that we should have saved the boy first, referring to Peeta. Katniss immediately takes that to be Peeta is a better speaker, but I do wonder if Coin was saying that, meaning that having Peeta would make Katniss cooperate with what they want to do more, that there wouldn't be as much bargaining that they have to do. They end up taking her to the hospital in District 8, and she's able to talk to people. She's really moved by it, and of course, everyone gets bombed. That scene is so powerful. I do want to know what kind of freaking arrows her shit is made out of, because what do you mean she's basically taking down helicopters, which they are made by BT. And something that I think maybe why people like this book the least is it is strange that we keep hearing about the rebels and what's happening, but I don't think we have like a great idea of like what is the fighting that's happening. We see when Katniss gets to go out a couple different times, but she is actively kept away from whatever the front lines are. And I'm just like, how is the organization working? I would love to know the behind the scenes of how this rebellion is happening, like a little bit more. And it's obviously not super relevant for Katniss to know, and they don't need to give her all that information if she was ever captured, blah, blah, blah. I, as a reader, when people are saying, oh, the rebels took over everything but 2, and I'm like, it's only been like a month, and these people have like technological stuff than you, more resources. But the idea is we burn, you burn with us. That if the workers seize the means of production, you know, they aren't able to continue on. Having a little bit of like, who are the people who are fighting? Like, what % would you say of the different districts are the people who are fighting versus the people who are in District 13? Like, how is District 13 dispatching this? That sort of thing. I know it's not important, but that is the question in the back of my mind when they're talking about the rebels. I'm like, how are they fighting? I think just having a scene of like Coin and Plutarch and them showing Katniss like what the front lines look like. I do like that we've gotten Cressida and Castor and Pollux. I forgot about those three, but like as soon as they showed up, I'm like, oh my god, it's these guys. Every propo that they do feels really important, and I like the feeling of having these new characters who are supporting her. There's a good amount of new characters that are introduced in this book, and not all of them I feel like are super important. I get Boggs. So Boggs is Coin's assistant, and he's like the one who is closest to Coin, who is most interacting with Katniss and like leading her around and everything. And he seems very sympathetic to her in a way that I'm like, I don't remember how his plot resolves, so I don't remember how we feel about him at all. We've also gotten mention that they don't know where Effie Trinket is. They don't know what her situation is, and we just have the styling crew. And for the purpose of the book, it does make sense that the crew was there, and for the purpose of the movie, it makes sense that the crew's not there because they are not characters that we really care about. They don't even have names in the movies. I don't think Effie shows up at all in this book. I think there totally would have been a bit of a purpose. I don't know, let's get to Peeta. Oh my god, Peeta. I love him to death. Given his first speech, he was super healthy and everything. But the second time he speaks, he looks emaciated. And it's only days later, and Katniss realizes that there's nothing that like put in time when the original interview was done. And so it's probably been a while, and he's been starved out, tortured, etc. Every time he is speaking, he's getting more agitated. He's getting more angry in a way that, like, obviously not super characteristic of Peeta, but it starts to distress Katniss so much that they're like, oh, let's do an extraction of him. They go without her. Gale goes, and she's like, holy shit, I might lose Gale and Peeta at the same time. It's very possible. But then they go in there, and it turns out it was super easy to get in there, and they're like, oh, something's wrong. And of course, Peeta is hijacked, and they sort of set that as like a bomb. The idea here that so many things are taking away what reality is from Katniss and Peeta, the unmooring of these characters, I think, is done very well in the writing of it. The way that Katniss doesn't always seem to have like a full train of thought. And also Peeta just being destroyed by this is, again, what we've already talked about in book 1 when he says the thing that I want is to not have them change who I am fundamentally, and so they change who he is. His worst fear has happened, and he cannot trust his own faculties. We also see, like, there's so much more brutality that's happening off screen with these guys that, like, his entire styling team, when he's taken away, is executed on live television. Just, like, really subtle, tiny things. There was a propo with Katniss and Finnick, and he basically straight up says that his family was going to be killed if he did not become a prostitute for the Capitol, and he decided to spill all the Capitol secrets, and people are really engaged with that. But what he decides to do is say the thing that everyone has said about Snow behind his back, that the way that he gained his ascension is from poison, that he has poisoned people who are against him and on the same side as him politically. Maybe we talk about that a little bit in Sunrise on the Reaping. Maybe there's a first poisoning in Songbirds and Snakes. I'm really curious to see how that works. But we finally have the reason why there's the blood and the rose smell, and it's because he has done so much poisoning that in order to make it look like he wasn't the one who poisoned them, he has drank so much poison. And so we have gotten our big clue in this book that he is ailing. It being poison and him like smelling of the way that he killed people is so fun. She says something along the lines of poison, the perfect weapon for a snake. So of course, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Lucy, and Snow, which I didn't remember him being referred to specifically as a snake, so that was fun. And we get our first introduction to the Hanging Tree as well, which, like, I kind of forgot what the plot of the Hanging Tree was. And she starts thinking about it, and starts thinking about it in relation to her and Peeta, and she starts understanding the murderer character, because the Hanging Tree is this murderer was hanged for his crimes, and he tells his love to flee, and then later in the song, he is calling her to him to join him in the Hanging Tree. And Katniss is wondering, like, what is the way out of the situation that I'm in? Is the Hanging Tree man, is he haunting her? Is he saying that you deserve to die like me? Or is he continuing what he's saying to be free? Is he saying the only way to be free is to die? And this is like the catastrophizing thoughts that Katniss is having, like not seeing a way out. Let's talk about Gale. Every conversation in this series directly with Gale that is not just delivering a piece of information is a disagreement. How vengeful Gale is and how disturbed Katniss is by this, and how he sees it as her like not taking things far enough. He's so in line with District 13. The like love triangle has been played up in this section. This is the only true part of the series that is really about the love triangle. Gale keeps pushing her and is like, I want to be with you. He keeps bringing it up at all these inopportune times. He's like, he's such a fucking pick-me. Oh, you'll never be with me because Peeta's being irreparably damaged. And so like, you'll always think of him as better than me. But she says like, oh, well, that's kind of how I felt when I had to kiss Peeta in the arena, that like I didn't get a chance with you. And he's just like is such a dick about it. And he talks about how the first time he realized that he liked her was when another guy flirted with her. And I'm like, that's so fucking you, Gale. Like you're so like, yeah, he wants to protect all these people. And yeah, he's a headstrong, like self-sacrificing person, but he's so toxic about it. And like, I cannot imagine reading this book and being like, oh, Gale is such a good guy that she should have ended up with. Like, I also don't understand, like, in the previous two books, thinking that, considering how little time we spend with him versus time with Peeta. From here on out, I remember, like, how characters die. I don't think I remember a lot of specifics. Gale and BT have started, like, making weapons and all this, and Gale starts taking these things that were trapping and applying it to humans. And Katniss is really disturbed by that, again, where she's like, you don't draw the line at humans. Like, the stuff that we were doing was sustenance. Like, we were doing that in order to live, and now you're trying to adapt your traps and this thing that, like, she kind of saw as sacred, I guess, and apply it to killing a large group of people when they are bombing District 2, I believe, the Nut. His plan succeeds, and he's gonna get rewarded for it. And last thing I want to talk about is how much we're talking about the dad in this book. It's really interesting because we don't bring him up a lot. But like when Katniss is singing The Hanging Tree, she's like, this is a song that my dad used to sing to me. When they go out into the meadow, she's thinking about her dad. She's thinking about her dad when they're like in the ruins. She keeps making sure that she takes like the wedding photo. Like there's so many little mentions of the dad. And then when the avalanche happens, we actually fully get a flashback to the day of the mine accident that killed her dad and Gale's dad too. That was really effective in talking about trauma while also seeing that Katniss has this empathy that Gale seems to have lost or possibly never had. So good. Such a good book. So I'm really curious to see how am I going to feel about this last third, considering nobody likes this book quite as much. Hello, I finished Mockingjay. I actually finished Mockingjay several days ago. I just was feeling like absolute garbage the last time I had the opportunity to film. And then I went on a trip to visit my sister. She's up in Ohio. It was her birthday coming up soon. So we went up to see her and did a couple of things in her area that she wanted to do. And did this trip that my mom had been planning for many years. She'd been wanting to do. That's what I was doing the last week. I went to Cedar Point. I did the second tallest roller coaster in the world, which is pretty cool. I wish I was feeling better. I'm feeling physically better than I was the last several days, but not like mentally. Let's talk about the last part of Mockingjay. One thing that I've emphasized in the other videos that I want to emphasize here is how we are defining the act structure. So The first act ends with PETA warning them District 13 is going to be bombed. Act 2 ends with PETA joining them on the siege of the Capitol. I think the last time I talked to you, we had been talking about like PETA had been hijacked and everything. In the beginning of Act 3, he'd finally been getting a little bit of remediation. You know, he can be in the same place as Katniss and not rip her face off. We're having to take a person from District 12 who is like a neutral party who like played with PETA as a kid to talk to him. And it's just interesting to me. There's like a handful of District 12 characters that are like mentioned like one time that we're just supposed to like pretend are somewhat important, and it's just this person doesn't mean anything. They're just a placeholder for District 12. People are like, oh, Madge doesn't exist. Madge is in like one scene. There's a couple of more missions that Katniss gets sent on. We have, for again a little bit of propaganda, we have the wedding of Finnick and Annie. Plutarch's whole thing is like, oh my god, this isn't a celebratory enough wedding. Like, this isn't like big enough. And then Coin is like, this is way too big. And it's interesting seeing that dichotomy. But the thing that is important here is that Katniss doesn't feel like dancing because of all the things that is going on at the time. And Joanna is one of the best characters in the series. Every single thing that she says is interesting and really characterizes her in a well-rounded, interesting way for the little information that we know about her. Tells Katniss, don't let the Capitol take dancing away from you. But then she gets back into wanting to defend everyone. She's finding out that they're going to do an assault on the Capitol, and she wants in, and she has not trained at all. Gale has been training this whole time, and Katniss, with all the stuff she got going on, she has been allowed to not train because she's the Mockingjay. She is this extra piece. She is this special piece on the board who they just want to look pretty because they don't see her as an actual asset. Katniss and Joanna end up, and I think Finnick as well, end up doing training, and they have to pass this final test that is very like a la Divergent. Obviously, Divergent came later, but like it reminds me of the test that you do in Divergent, where they get like plugged into a simulation, and the people who are running it know your weaknesses just from watching you train, and so they throw things at you that they know are going to trip you up. And what happens with Katniss, she realizes that her weakness is that she doesn't want to follow orders. So she makes sure she follows all of the orders to a T so that she can not follow orders later. That's my girl. I love her. But Katniss passes her test because she sees right through what they see as her weakness. It is the weakness that she has in the system of District 13, not her actual weakness. Because her ability to make her own decisions ultimately like pays off in the series. Most of Katniss's rash decisions end up being the right thing to do. She ends up getting sent off into this area of the Capitol that has been abandoned, and they've put all of these things called pods everywhere, which I'm going to be honest with you, I cannot picture what these things look like. I have no visual identity of what this was. Not only that, I did not recall a lot of these characters, including Boggs. Literally no memory of him, so I decided to look at the cast list. Like, I remember Cressida. I remember Natalie Dormer. Like, very, very iconic shaved head look. I was like, cute. Did not remember Boggs at all. Turns out it's Mahershala Ali. And I'm like, I feel like I would remember Mahershala Ali being in this movie. Like, he's very famous. Don't recall him at all. How much screen time does he have? I got too curious and wanted to know how much screen time he had, and somebody has already done the math for me and done a character breakdown of the top 28 screen time characters in all 5 of the movies so far. So I can't wait for this to be updated for Sunrise on the Raping. Shockingly, Boggs is the number 8 character with screen time in the series, and I think it's because he's probably like in the background of like a lot of Mockingjay scenes. He gets 13 minutes in Mockingjay Part 1 and 12 minutes in Mockingjay Part 2, which puts him at the number 4 most screen time character in Mockingjay Part 1 and the number 5 most screen time character in Mockingjay Part 2. Because he has like a medium amount of time in both movies rather than just one of them. For example, Coin has more time than him in Mockingjay Part 1, but Plutarch has more time than him in Mockingjay Part 2, even though Plutarch is literally in over half these movies. Caesar Flickerman gets 45 seconds in Mockingjay Part 2. Like, how much time did this person take? Plutarch only gets 6 minutes and 45 seconds in Catching Fire, but he gets a great 6 minutes and 45 seconds. So we are probably going to see Haymitch jump from the number 6 character up to being the number 2 or 3 character. He's certainly going to pass Peeta because this movie is about him and it's going to be more than 2 hours long. And he is only 1 hour behind Peeta. The only reason Snow is a major player in this is because of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is his backstory movie. He only has 26 minutes in the original series, which would put him slightly above Boggs. So, which means it's so freaking weird how high Boggs is up in this list. He is higher up than Coin, he is higher up than Effie, and Cressida is also higher up than Plutarch. Wild to me. Please let me know your reaction to this list. Or maybe like I just didn't know who he was at the time. That's a possibility. I mean, was Green Book out? I can picture like in the movie them like moving through the Capitol, but I don't know what these pods look like. Basically, it's all of this booby trapping that they've done through this area of the Capitol residential area, mostly, that they have evacuated. And like, oh, it'll be a good path into the Capitol that way. So they are going to try to make their way through that area to get to the Capitol. Katniss gets sent with her star squad, so it's her, and it's Finnick, and it's Gale, and like a bunch of other people who are supposed to be protecting them with Boggs as their leader. Not long into that, some of their people get bombed and they have reinforcements sent in, and Peeta is one of the people who is sent as reinforcement. And that is when Katniss realizes that Coin does not give a shit about her. Coin no longer sees Katniss's life as valuable and actually would prefer her to be dead because then she can be a martyr and she can twist Katniss's voice however she wants to, versus if she's alive, she can, you know, jeopardize what Coin sees as her mission. Honestly, we get less like one-on-one, face-to-face time with Coin than I was anticipating, which it's also kind of what happens with Snow. And it's like Katniss, once again, when it comes to her own survival, she is so tuned into what's going on. And it kind of reminds me of when she's in the games and Haymitch is giving her clues. She can read into them immediately. And when she senses that somebody has it out for her, guess what? She's right this time. She's always on her guard. More often than not, people are out to get her anyway. It's like Catching Fire and then Peeta is like the only time people aren't out to get her. And the thing that stands out about the pods that is 100% not what I remembered, because I do remember some of the effects of the pods, like the tar slime thing that like floods the streets. I remember that. And like the mutts coming in. Sure, I remember that. What I didn't remember is that Katniss sees these pods set up through this area and she immediately says, it's another arena. And that's clearly what Suzanne Collins was going for, to give this end of this book the feeling of being in the Hunger Games. I don't think she succeeds. This book feels too different from the other books for that to succeed in feeling like the Hunger Games. Even though we are getting senseless deaths, it doesn't feel the same. It almost feels more arbitrary that these people are dying. People are just getting picked off one by one, and it's like, yep, of course, the narrative was going to make that happen. It feels less like people are actually fighting for their lives. It's just like, oh, they sprang a booby trap and they died. Oop, they sprang a booby trap and they died. And they sprang a different booby trap and they died. Like I mentioned before, the act break is Peeta showing up. And Peeta has put handcuffs on and he refuses to let anybody take them off of him. He is having like a watch on him all the time. He's actually like not helpful at all. And they know that. She's like really infuriated by this whole situation that has happened with him. But she eventually has to like sit down with herself and realize like, if this happened to me, Peeta would be doing everything in his power to be kind to me and reassure me. And I am not doing that. I am fighting fire with fire and I need to help him. She starts being kind to him. That's where we get the scene of like her telling him what their favorite colors are and like really specific things that she's noticed about him, which the fact that he always double knots his shoelaces. Katniss, do you not double knot your shoelaces? I don't know that I know anybody who doesn't double knot their shoelaces. Has that been lost in time in between now and Panem? We ended up getting through the Capitol. Multiple people are dying and everything. We have the death of Finnick, of course. Very clearly to me, like, the whole purpose of there being a wedding was for the purpose of killing Finnick off later. So, like, you feel worse that, like, oh, he got his happy ending, and as soon as he gets his happy ending, it's taken away from him. That arc always felt like, yeah, I see what you're doing, man. They finally, like, pop up into the area that is populated again, and a woman steps out and sees them, and Katniss shoots her point blank and kills her. And she finally thinks to herself, she's like, oh, Katniss, what are you doing? You're killing unarmed civilians now? What are you doing? And I guarantee you, she is the only person in that group who views the people of the Capitol as unarmed civilians. That just really, really stuck out to me. I thought it was fun that everyone had to dress up as if they're in the Capitol to get through. I don't remember that happening in the movie. We will find out later, much later, because we got to get through 2 movies to get there. And of course, like, the really big thing at the end here is the final assault of the Capitol, where we see there's a bunch of school children that the Capitol has, like, grouped up outside an entrance to the president's mansion, whatever the fuck it's called, in order to be essentially a human shield. The rebellion won't hurt the children, so they can't get in. Obviously, that's disgusting. It reminds you of the Hunger Games, blah, blah, blah. A Capitol ship goes over, sends down parachutes that turn into bombs. Katniss sees some of the rebellion medics run over to them. She sees one of them as Prim, and then she realizes what this is at the exact same moment that the bombs go off again. And we know that earlier, one of the things that Gale told to BT that you want to do when you're trapping animals, harm one thing so that other creatures will come and help it, and you are able to get a larger quarry because of that. I did remember that, like, the Gale kills Prim narrative, like, I remember that that's not literal, but I didn't remember what the connection was. I kind of was under the impression that he was one of the people flying the aircraft. Obviously, he's not. He's the genius behind it, which is, like, worse. And when Gale and Katniss finally get to talk again, he's such a bitch about it. He's like, oh, well, I guess you're never gonna get over it that I killed your sister. And it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna get over that. The fact that your attitude about it is so pessimistic, so antagonistic against me, like, defensive. I know so many toxic people who are just like Gale, and everyone who is like, oh my God, I love Gale. Like, you need to go to therapy yesterday. These people are not good for you to have in their lives. This, like, self-deprecating thing where they keep saying, like, oh, I'm not good enough for you. Like, oh my God, shut the fuck up. If I was Katniss's friend, I would be like, never talk to Gale again, like, beginning of this book. Katniss and so many other people are very, very hurt by the bombing. She ends up getting, like, burns all over her. Her hair has to be cut. She's kept in the president's mansion. I'm going to keep calling it that. I don't remember what it's called. She gets kind of freaked out by that, and she eventually gets enough wherewithal to figure out what's going on. There has already been a trial for President Snow, and he is going to be executed, and Katniss, as she wanted, is going to do it. Before that ends up happening, we have these 7 survivors, victors of the Hunger Games, are summoned by Coin, and Coin's like, hey, we know that we want to punish the people who are responsible for killing us all. It is impractical for us to kill all of the people responsible. So our solution is to make a Hunger Games of the Capitol's children. Just one of them, just to teach them a lesson. And it's going to be up to a vote of the people who are left. We have some people saying yes, some people saying no. The last 2 votes are Katniss and Haymitch. Of course, Haymitch, like, you have to remember, Haymitch is also a survivor of the games, and, like, putting him in that slot was actually, like, a reminder. Like, of course he's a survivor of the games, but you see him as a mentor. You don't see him as a player. Katniss just thinks and thinks and thinks. And this is, like, the section of the book that I probably like the most. There was so much highlighting that I did, like, right at the end, or underlining. We're down to Katniss and Haymitch, says Coin. Was it like this then? 75 years or so ago? Did a group of people sit around and cast their votes on initiating the Hunger Games? Was there dissent? Did someone make a case for mercy that was beaten down by the calls for the death of the district's children? The scent of Snow's rose curls up into my nose, down into my throat, squeezing it tight with despair. And then I underline this a ton. All those people I loved, dead, and we are discussing the next Hunger Games in an attempt to avoid wasting life. Nothing has changed. Nothing will ever change now. And she says she weighs her options carefully and says that she supports that the Hunger Games will happen in honor of Prim. Of course, Prim is a healer who wanted to save the lives of the children who were just bombed. Haymitch is like, I'll follow the Mockingjay, and knowing that Katniss usually has an ulterior motive to whatever she's doing. We have a meeting with Snow. He is clearly ailing, and because of the poison he's been taking his whole life, he's like coughing up blood all the time. And I do want to talk about how this section of Mockingjay is set in the winter, and there are so many references to snow, the thing falling from the sky, and like the blood falling on the snow when the children die. We're not subtle with that part, right? And she mentions the bombing of the children, and he's like, dude, we didn't do that. We said we would be honest with each other. I'm not lying to you. That is the thing that she finally believes, that District 13 was the one to bomb those children. And then they thought that that waste of life was okay. Of course, Katniss decides to kill President Coin instead of President Snow. And immediately after, she tries to take her own life, and Peeta stops her. Peeta somehow is close enough to her that he physically holds her and stops her from doing that. And Snow starts laughing, and nobody knows how President Snow dies. President Snow dies either from being stampeded or from coughing up blood. The fact that nobody knows how he dies is so go out with a whimper instead of a bang. After she has killed the president and like she knows that she is going to be executed or whatever, she attempts to take her own life as much as she can. And she is put in a room where she is unable to do so. She is put on so many drugs and she just wants a way out. And eventually she is freed. She like kind of makes peace with some stuff, but she is freed from there, and she is sent back to District 12 for her to be able to like restart her life. There are some people who are trying to make a life again in District 12. The scenes of Katniss no longer seeing value in her own life stuck out to me as being a very mature conversation for that. And it was very appropriate given the headspace that Katniss has been, where she was just on a collision course. There was nowhere else for her to go. And it's good to see the stumbling towards healing that she is doing toward the end of the book. I want to talk about Peeta, because he is so important to the series and to me. I was under the impression that they got to be cool with each other like way earlier in the book than where it actually happens. Like it's basically the end of the book. You love me, real or not real. Like that happens at like the end of the book when they are in District 12 together again. Which I didn't realize that that's what happened. I know the things that happen. I don't necessarily know the order or the pacing of it. Peeta's hijacking to kind of be seen so late into the book and then be quote unquote resolved so late into the book surprised me. I would have thought it was earlier. The things that she realizes when she finally chooses Peeta. Oh, another quote at the execution that I really liked, after she has already killed Coin. And then a terrible thought hits me. What if they're not going to kill me? What if they have more plans for me? A new way to remake, train, and use me? I won't do it. If I can't kill myself in this room, I will take the first opportunity outside of it to finish the job. They can fatten me up, they can give me a full body polish, dress me up, and make me beautiful again. They can design dream weapons that come to life in my hands, but they will never again brainwash me into the necessity of using them. I no longer feel any allegiance to these monsters called human beings, despise being one myself. I think that Peeta was onto something about us destroying one another and letting some decent species take over, because something is significantly wrong with a creature that sacrifices its children's lives to settle its differences. You can spin it any way you like. Snow thought the Hunger Games was an efficient means of control. Coin thought the parachutes would expedite the war, but in the end, who does it benefit? No one. The truth is, it benefits no one to live in a world where these things happen. The thing that happens in Katniss's mind when she talks about why it was so important for her to be with Peeta, that what I needed to survive is not Gale's fire kindled with rage and hatred. I have plenty of fire myself. What I need is the dandelion in the spring, the bright yellow that means rebirth instead of destruction, the promise that life can go on no matter how bad our loss is, that it can be good again, and only Peeta can give me that. So after, when he whispers, you love me, real or not real, I tell him real. That's the end. And then there's of course, the epilogue. I love the epilogue so much. I love that we don't get their children's names, that it's like a privacy for her. I love talking about how the meadow was her safe place and it turns into a mass grave of her people. And then it turns into a place where her children can play safely. And her talking about how like she still has to deal with the trauma of all the things that have happened to her, but she is looking forward to a better day. Like, it's gorgeous and I love it and it's great. I've talked for 30 minutes now, so I don't know if I have more to say. I'm sure I do. I'm sure I have a million things to say about this. And there's going to be things that I regret skipping over. I will say, this is the lowest rated book of the original trilogy. I don't know how to feel about this in terms of ranking it by the other books. The Hunger Games, to me, is the better book. I think it is very consistent feeling. It has a consistent pace to it. It feels all one thing. There's high highs of Catching Fire and low lows that are above the range of the Hunger Games. Versus Mockingjay just feels like an entirely different beast, but it still does feel like a natural progression of the story into a darker territory, into like, we've burned everything down before, we have to do something different. A lot of trilogies feel this way, where they've really, really changed something different. But this one does it the best. I did look back at my review for the star rating I had. I don't know for sure that I didn't like change that later. I can double check myself, but I did have Catching Fire as my lowest rated book in the series. But I do think that I tended to rate finales in series 5 stars pretty freaking consistently when I was young. To my knowledge, Catching Fire was my least favorite as a kid. I don't know that I agree with that. I still think that The Hunger Games is the best book in the series. Mockingjay and Catching Fire like are both really, really worthy sequels. They're fantastic. I think they both are 5-star range for me. Even though I have like nitpicks with either one, I think they're brilliant. But they also have like different things that they are trying to tackle in order to function in a series in a way that the first book didn't have to. It sort of had the freedom to have the structure that it wanted to, versus these had a little bit tougher of a job. There was so much that I underlined in this. There was so much that I enjoyed. So I'm ready to go check out Mockingjay Part 1. We're always trying to find new locations here. I'm here with my Mockingjay colored fire to give you my thoughts on Mockingjay Part 1. But before I do that, I do want to say I did have a conversation with Austin about Mockingjay, and I realized I don't know if I actually talked about my like complaints of Mockingjay enough. Because I was like, man, I don't know why this is like the least favorite of the series. Like, obviously, it breaks the formula, and therefore, it's going to please people the least of them. I would say my major complaints, number 1, the revolution outside of what we physically see with Katniss's eyes does not feel real. When Coin starts giving us updates that are like, oh, we've taken all the districts but 2, I'm like, I kind of don't believe you, and you could say literally anything. And I don't mean Katniss should not trust Coin, because Coin actually, I don't think Coin ever says anything untrue to Katniss. She's just, you know, not a great person. That just didn't feel fleshed out. Number 2, the deaths don't feel important. I think I talked about Finnick's death already, but just like all of the deaths that are happening with the pods and everything, that whole section just does not feel important. You know for a fact that Boggs is going to die because of the way that they set up the little tracker thing that Katniss wants, that it's like linked to that person unless they die. And it's like, well, of course he's going to die. Those would be my two really major complaints. Austin's complaint saying he didn't like Mockingjay as much because Katniss isn't that involved in the actual revolution, and I actually liked that. Ironic given what I just said. He's like, why isn't, like, as soon as Katniss gets to the Capitol mansion, like, the fighting's over and she doesn't see anything. It didn't actually matter that Katniss got there because the revolution was going to get there anyway. To me, the reason the Hunger Games feels more realistic than so many of the things that try to imitate it is because Katniss is not supposed to be the number one major fighter. Like, she does the thing that ends up setting the tone of the rebellion, killing Coin, which is great. And like, that to me makes so much more sense. The way that Katniss is treated, I think, is so particular and specific versus so many other YA series. The main character is actually the best fighter alive. And like, Katniss is a great fighter, and that's why she got the way that she is, but the way that the politics of it is treating her in a different way, and like treating her like the symbol she is and also like the teenage girl she is. She's not like the number one fighter out here. Let's talk Mockingjay Part 1. I think I was going to do these in one clip, and then I'm probably going to go like 2 weeks between watching the movies. The opening credits of this movie are silent, and I tried to turn up the sound on my television. We start out with Katniss trying to hide in District 13 in the pipes and stuff, reciting the truths that she recites to herself in the book, which I thought was a great way to introduce Katniss's mental state versus the book starts out with her already being in District 12. In the movie, instead of like dropping us there and her explaining it in her mind, it has it all play out on screen. It ends up being like very natural seeming. If they had done it the way that they did in the book, they might have had to like shoehorn dialogue about why Katniss is there. Katniss, to me, looks way too hale and hearty for having been on an IV and like suffered burns and all that stuff. The no makeup look looks great. However, she should look, I don't know, recently ill. Like, she is so disturbed and unwell and upset throughout Mockingjay, and yet Jennifer Lawrence looks so well throughout this movie. We have a conversation with Finnick before the title page. He says that he wishes Annie were dead rather than in the Capitol. I kind of don't remember that being in the book, but that means that Annie has been brought up to Katniss beforehand, so she remembers Annie later. Instead of in the book, she forgets to put Annie on the list of victors that she wants to protect. We meet Coin, and she immediately, to me, comes off as more warm than she does in the book. Like, she really feels like she's trying to have this like Colonel angle almost. Is that like a writer-director choice? Is that like a casting choice? Is that an acting choice? Coin then lore dumps to Katniss. Instead of Katniss telling us, starting the movie here rather than a little bit later probably just makes a little bit more sense. Also, Julianne Moore's contacts in this movie look so creepy. I think she looks like Mantis from Guardians, which, like, Mantis from Guardians, she doesn't look creepy because she's an alien. After Katniss is sort of indignant about going along with everything, we know in the book that Plutarch was the one that was like, who sent her out to District 12. But here we see him like tell Coin that's what should be done. And Coin's like, okay. So we are sowing the seed pretty early in the movie of seeing Plutarch, just like he did with Snow, be very involved in like leadership decisions and like almost being the one to control things. Not an angle that's in the book, and I find it fascinating. We return to District 12. Her stepping on the skull does happen. I did not believe Jennifer Lawrence right after she steps on the skull and she's like, her hand shaking to cover her mouth. But then like 30 seconds later, she's like crawling on her hands and knees. And I did believe her then. She goes into her house. Buttercup the cat comes in through the window and knocks something over, which is very uncat-like in my opinion. In terms of like, he doesn't bat something over. He accidentally runs into something. Presumably, Buttercup has been using this window before. Why is he suddenly knocking something over? Also, Katniss picks up the photo of her father. And also, we're not allowed to forget the photo of the father, like in the book and the movie, like we just keep being like, oh, we gotta move all Katniss's few belongings. But in the movie, the photo of her dad is as if it was taken in like World War II. It's like a sepia photo. And I do have to ask, what is the process of how this photo was taken? You're telling me that there are film cameras or like daguerreotypes or something, that there's anything other than a digital camera in Panem? Is the implication here, which obviously there's not an implication, we're deep diving, is the implication here that somebody in the districts has like reinvented film or daguerreotypes or whatever, like old-timey cameras? Or like, is it really that the Capitol will be giving people old-timey cameras because they're shittier? Like, that's so weird to me. Anyway, we have a snow scene, and we have the very stereotypical, the evil man gets shaved. That is the very, like, stereotypical, like, villain scene in a movie. That and, like, eating somebody else's food. The conversation that Snow has with his, like, writer about, like, what language he wants to use about the rebellion, I thought was really interesting. Of course, that's not in the book. But we get to see Snow's speech, and it sort of serves as, like, exposition. We don't see a long speech from Snow in the book. We see Snow's speech be projected, and we get cuts to the different districts, and we see people in each district, bags over their head, gun to their head, and killed in front of everyone during this speech that he gives, which I thought was like really effective. We also see Snow's granddaughter again, who is an invention of the movies, who still has her Katniss braid, and she's like petting it as he's giving this speech. We're back in District 13. I'm not gonna lie to you, like reading the book, like I have always pictured like the regular parts of District 13, not like the bunker, as being like hospital lit. And in the movie, it is, you know, very underground. It's very like City of Ember looking. Guess that makes sense considering they would, of course, want to conserve energy. Caesar Flickerman pronounces it Panem 20 seconds after Snow has said Panem. Guys, let's be consistent. Of course, with Caesar, we get the first interview with Peeta. You know, there's not a lot of room for the costuming department to do its thing like it did in Catching Fire in this movie because it's so austere. But specifically, this costume of the first time we see Peeta is my favorite costume in the movie, because what the fuck is going on with his tie? It's like stabbing him in the neck. Awesome storytelling. Katniss witnesses the Peeta speech in front of everyone now, and she sees everyone like shout traitor at him. So we do actually get like more of a vibe in the movie that people don't like Peeta and think he's a traitor than they do in the book. Katniss wakes up from a nightmare, and Peeta runs in and like stays with her and everything like we see him do in Catching Fire. I didn't compare the dialogue there to see if it's a one-to-one match to what we actually see happen in Catching Fire. That's one of the most emotional I was in the entire movie. This type of scene does happen in the book. It's not like as detailed. It's a little bit of a throwaway beginning of a chapter. I just wanted to cry at that scene. Like, that was so good. Anyway, Katniss decides to be the Mockingjay, and she gives her demands. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, she does remember Annie the first time. She does not mention Anabaria at all. In fact, Anabaria does not exist in the Mockingjay movie except for when she is in part 2. She is at the table. Really interesting dynamic here of Coin immediately shoots down Katniss's offer. Katniss decides to push back, and Plutarch is like, that's her. Because we saw earlier in the movie, Coin's like, I think you've actually oversold Katniss. I don't think she's like as fiery as you've been saying she is. And it's just because she wasn't put under pressure. The only other condition that Katniss makes, other than saving the victors, is the cat. She does not require Coin to let her kill Snow or to do the hunting with Gale. We only see the hunting with Gale once. Effie in the movie, of course, replaces the stylists. Have I talked about this before? why the fuck does Effie have a British accent? There's no capital-ish people in this movie particularly that have a British accent. And we have multiple British actors doing American accents in this movie. So why do we have American actress Elizabeth Banks doing a British accent? I understand it's supposed to sound posh. Caesar Flickerman's not doing a British accent. It would be one thing if it was a capital accent, but it kind of seems like it's something that she puts on herself. Plutarch introduces Effie to Coin, and the little like down up that Effie gives Coin, like so unimpressed with how she looks, was so fucking funny. I loved that. That was such a good little choice. And that scene is like setting up how Plutarch is really trying to like insert himself and his sensibilities and his like propaganda machine essentially into the way that Coin runs District 13, which like this is the first time that they've had to like work together properly. I love that angle in the movies. We have the first propo, whatever the fuck it's called. I hate that word. It's so unnatural. Anyway, Effie says the kiss you, kill you, or be you line that was originally Phoenix in the books. Propo is just short for propaganda, not propaganda spot in the movie, which makes more fucking sense. BT shows up and BT's in a wheelchair. And I'm gonna be so real with you. When I think of BT, I think of BT being in a wheelchair. I kind of forgot that he's not already handicapped going into Catching Fire. Like, obviously I just watched Catching Fire and he wasn't handicapped. But like, I didn't think about how like in my mind he's not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. In the movie, we have added a conversation between Katniss and Boggs about why District 13 did not fire on the Capitol earlier. He said that they would have all been killed because they were too weak. Like there would have been no survivors if they had decided to attack the Capitol. She's like, super hypocrite. That is what everybody in District 13 is getting mad at PETA for, because PETA's doing the whole like, guys, we can't all survive this if we have a war. And it's like, well, that was your excuse too. Anyway, Natalie Dormer as Cressida, she is unbelievably charming. Her face is so expressive. It feels like it would be very good, like animated. Castor and Pollux are supposed to be identical twins, and in the movie, they don't even look similar. And if you did not know that Castor and Pollux were literally the twins from the constellation Gemini, you would not know that these characters are brothers. I don't think that the three-finger salute is brought up in Mockingjay, the book. Here, we do see it at the hospital. We again get to see a cut to Snow as he orders the bombing of the hospital. The people in the hospital, I did not find nearly as effective in the movie as I did in the book. Like, I liked seeing Katniss go around and talk to people in the book, but Katniss's "You Burn With Us" speech I found way effective. It really is like we're bringing that out of Katniss, but I think that's just those really big emotional like outburst moments is where Jennifer Lawrence shines as an actress. The hoorahs that District 13 does are weird. Katniss in the movie just generally has less expressed hatred for District 13. Obviously, we're not in her head, but like, I don't think as a audience, like we get her having tensions with people like she has with every single human being except for her sister. She doesn't really have this like thing against them. And in the book, from literally chapter 1, she's like, I hate District 13. It is said that explicitly. Like I said, one of my complaints about the book is we don't get to see how the rebels are fighting or what's going on with them. And we have multiple scenes throughout the movie in which we see different people doing rebellious acts. Lumberjack men like bomb some peacekeepers, right? That scene is nonsense. Like the peacekeepers have some stormtrooper levels of accuracy in shooting these people who have absolutely zero cover and are not going very fast. But like, it's still effective in saying, oh, this is a movement and not just like one group of people. The dam is like one of the best scenes in this movie. I love the dam being bombed. Katniss and Gale end up going hunting one time in the movie, and they find a stag or an elk that isn't afraid because it's never been hunted, which is really interesting. Gale says it's almost not fair, which seems sort of out of line with his whole like gung-ho-ness about killing people. Like that's his whole fucking point in this book. So why is he the one that says it's almost not fair? Maybe the point is the almost. Then we get another Peeta FaceTime, and Josh's acting here is so good. And also, apparently, they fucking know how to make people look ill. So where is that energy for Katniss? After this call from Peeta, Gale straight up to Katniss's face calls Peeta a coward. And this sort of antagonistic energy towards Peeta, like as a person, Gale doesn't really have in the book. Both in book and movie, he tells Katniss, like, hey, Peeta's probably doing this because he's trying to protect you. In the movie, Gale just has less empathy for Peeta. We get explicit numbers of District 12 in the movie. Gale says that 915 people out of 10,000 in which obviously 10,000 is a round number, so it's not exact, but 915 people from District 12 were saved versus who cares? But in the book, it's more than 800 are saved, which is less than 10% of the original population. We get to the hanging tree scene where Pollux asks her to sing for the Mockingjays, and she does the hanging tree. And I actually had a very vivid memory of being in the theater, hearing the song, and being like, that is not the tune I put to it in my head. I think that was funny, because like now, like I cannot imagine there being another tune to the song. Also, the Mockingjays do not repeat the song back to her, which was like the whole point of asking her to sing. Fun fact, The Hanging Tree got to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. Plutarch ends up in the recording of The Hanging Tree that they end up putting in the propos. He ends up changing the lyrics to Hanging Tree, and he says it to people. He's like, I actually decided to change the phrase necklace of rope to necklace of hope. This does not happen in the book. It is only ever necklace of rope. The damn bombing happens here. Love that scene. Then we have the final call from Peeta where he's going to give them the warning. They're showing the propos at the same time as the call from Peeta. And then like Peeta's like, Katniss? This does not happen in the book. What happens in the book is that the people in like the booth are disturbed. But Peeta cannot see a live stream of the feed. Why on earth would Peeta be seeing a live feed of the interview that he's on? Like, it's only gonna be on a delay. Like, that would be a very confusing thing. We also do not do the whole Katniss pretends not to see the second Peeta interview thing. I did not remember, this does happen in the book, that Gale went for Prim to get the cat. It's interesting that Suzanne Collins decided to do that, considering the ending. Because it's like, just because like the things that you do specifically for me don't matter, it's also like your actions and your values that are also going to cause other things. Like I think that's just very, very poignant that yes, in the moment, Gale would help Prim. But he also has all of these intentions that end up hurting and killing her. I have it written down here, quote, why do people think this is the worst movie of the four? I get that this one is like not the full story, right? But like, I actually appreciated its length. It's paced out very similarly to the book. I didn't think it was paced slowly. Like everything felt really good and it felt like the book. I don't know. Katniss, after the bombing of District 13, they end up like going out and they see the roses. This is when I realized like the light hit her in a certain way that I figured out. I was like, oh, Jennifer Lawrence's hair is not just darker in this movie. This is a wig. And it was just really obvious to me that it was a wig in that shot. But instead of Snow leaving like a dozen or so roses like he does in the book, he ends up just like littering a shit ton. And there is no mention of Katniss's PTSD to the smell of these like this genetically modified smell of these roses. A moment that I didn't talk about before in the book that happens here, she freezes up and can't do the propo because she thinks, oh shit, like they're gonna kill Peeta. And Haymitch is the one to comfort her. I just really loved the moment where she realizes that the only person around her that loves Peeta like she does is Haymitch. And even though the two of them are fighting, like that's the one thing that they like can come together over. I wish there was more fucking Haymitch in this movie. Oh my God, I literally forgot to mention this. So the first propo when they're in front of the screens and everything is when we see Haymitch for the first time. And he comes in after he has been basically in rehab. Katniss says some sort of biting comment like, sorry, I didn't even recognize you when you're sober. Like, this guy doesn't look strung out. He doesn't look like he's been in recovery for a lifelong addiction. He literally just looks fucking normal. So this comment that Katniss makes, I understand it's sarcasm, but like it literally, like you could not tell that there's something different about him. Haymitch the exposition machine is back, not nearly as much as he normally is, but bro, when he mentioned, quote, storming the Capitol, we can't call it that anymore. Like, I fully, like, flinched. In the movie, we actually get to see the mission to extract the tributes. The exact thing that happens in the books, but Katniss does not witness, happens where Finnick's monologue is playing over like the Capitol airwaves while the extraction is happening. It's a really cool moment where we see this narration of Finnick's life over this extraction mission. It's what happens, but we just don't get to see it. We just see it being filmed, and then we are told that that's what happens later. They add this thing where they lose communication with the extraction team. In the book, the extraction just happens. Katniss is not like witnessing it in any way. She's literally just waiting to be told that it's happened. But they like lose communication from this like flashbang. They're like blocking the signals or whatever. And so Katniss, who is in the war room, like watching the extraction happen, like says, oh, put me on the air. Let's get Snow to try to talk to me. But she ends up having like this one-on-one conversation with Snow. This whole conversation is made up by the movie. And he says the quote, "It's the things we love the most that destroy us." That is made by the movie. And that is something that Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the movie, decides to reference. I tried looking it up. I did not find a source from the books. Snow looks like he's in front of a green screen here. In the filming of this movie, he's in front of some sort of green screen. But I wonder if it's canon that Snow is in front of a green screen because he's unwell and maybe he wasn't prepared or whatever. And they're like, well, let's just put you here. I don't know, but it looks awful. At the end of this, when Snow's like, whatever, dude, and they think they've lost the mission, she freaks out and cries and is hugging Haymitch, saying over and over again, did I lose them both tonight? In the book, chapter 12, I remember it distinctly, opens up with the line, today I might lose both of them. Which like just stood out to me as good opening line of a chapter, and I just happen to remember that. As we are waiting, they insert more scenes about the extraction in the movie, and Coin has this moment where she is comforting Katniss while she is waiting to hear if everyone has come back alive. And she is, again, being presented as like way more personable and like trying to get Katniss on her side. Prim mentions in the movie that Coin has a dead daughter and husband. Daughter presumably lost to the illness that swept through the children. That is not mentioned in the book. I think it's almost more interesting in the book that there's a woman in power who has no familial connection. Is that more interesting or not? If a woman tried to run for president without a husband and children, she would never win. Coin is usually very terse, and that's her thing. And that we have like this dichotomy between Plutarch and Coin, who are on the same side, but one of them is extravagant and one of them is austere, like I said before. And we see all these speeches from Coin throughout the movie. Some of them are added by the movie, not all of them. Over the course of the movie, she starts talking a little bit more, and she suddenly has this speech at the end of the movie that is so much more impassioned. And then we cut to Plutarch, and he's mouthing along with her. So we see that Plutarch is really pulling the strings behind her trying to unite the people, right? Oh, that's such a good addition that the movies make of this extra layer of like what Plutarch's up to. The ending of the movie is seeing as Katniss walking up to seeing Peeta like thrashing on the bed. Of course, we've seen the attack and everything. Attack was cool. Like all of these movies, like I have less to say toward the end of the movie because it's just like action, and it's usually well done. And I just remember the feeling of being in the theater for the first time, watching Peeta on the hospital bed, being devastated and being like, oh my god, I have to wait a year for the next movie. We get the credits. I completely forgot about the original Lorde song that was written for this movie. Like I knew that Lorde did the soundtrack, especially because the Everybody Wants to Rule the World cover that she did was, I'm ashamed to say, the first time I ever heard that song, which is now like one of my favorite songs of all time. Obviously, the original is the best. I remember my dad like hearing this version. He's like, what the fuck is this? And he had to show me the original song and fix that. And he was like, this is not how the song's supposed to go. I forgot about Yellow Flicker Beat. And I was like, being able to like sing along and I knew the words and I was like, what the fuck is this song called? It was funny. We of course have the tribute to Philip Seymour Hoffman at the end of the movie. So Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2 were filmed back to back, possibly concurrently a little bit. He had filmed all but 2 of his scenes with dialogue in Mockingjay Part 2 before he passed away. He died of an overdose. And Mockingjay Part 2 was his final movie. And we'll talk more about that in Part 2. I didn't have a lot of things that like we don't see because like we haven't gotten to Part 2 yet, so there might be some things in there. But one thing that I noticed, we don't talk about like the rationing at all. And we don't talk about like the strict schedules that everybody is given. That's basically all I had. So let's do Part 2.
Alrighty, it's time for Mockingjay Part 2. So I haven't done any comparisons of the length in Mockingjay Part 1, but I'm doing it in Mockingjay Part 2. I kind of forgot that I like doing that. But I noticed it in this one. I was like, I feel like we're lingering on this part for a long time. My conclusion on the pacing here is that this is the most similar that it gets to the pacing of the book. Like I thought that the end's like a little drawn out in the movie because they have to have like actual scenes rather than just like a sentence. The break between movie 1 and movie 2 happens at the chapter break between chapters 12 and 13. Feels very appropriate. In my copy, that's page 207 that this movie starts at. The movies are 123 minutes long and 137 minutes long, meaning the total runtime of these movies is 260 minutes or 4 hours and 20 minutes. So movie 2 starts 45% of the way into the book and 47% of the way into those 2 movies. That's really close. We start off Mockingjay Part 2 with my name is Katniss Everdeen again, as she has been choked out by Peeta and she is recovering. They ask her to speak and the first thing she says is my name is Katniss Everdeen. It's a fun callback to this thing that she does in the books and also the exact thing that she opens with in Mockingjay Part 1. Della, of course, is replaced by Prim. No surprise. I understand why Suzanne Collins did Della in the first place because in a realistic situation, yes, Prim is too close to Katniss. It's a better idea to get him someone who is unconnected to Katniss. Prim immediately tells him about the attacks on his family versus, if I'm not wrong, they wait a long time to tell him that because he's in like such a fragile state. He also freaks out and you can see, if you look at him, his face is pretty pale when he's freaking out, but like the top of his forehead and his whole chest area is red because he's screaming. The makeup that was supposed to make him look sick, it does make him look sick there, but like, it just makes it really obvious that he's wearing makeup. I hate Gale in the books, but like I hate Gale more in the movies. The like kisses that she has with Gale feel more forced in the movies. In the book, they like then go hunting and she thinks about it for a long time and they end up kissing while they are out hunting. It's not directly after this obvious dig at her. We get to see some District 2 stuff and we see Gwendolyn Christie Gwendolyn Christie's in this movie. Of course, I didn't know who that was at the time. She started in Game of Thrones 3 years before this movie, but I personally would not watch Game of Thrones for many more years. She only has like 2 or 3 lines and her accent is already slipping. So I complained before about Coin's eye contact. Even like the previous scene that we see Coin in Mockingjay Part 2, her eyes look almost black, like they're filled with will. But then you get to this scene where she's on the Zoom call with Gwendolyn Christie and her eyes look really startling. Why does it look so different in just this scene? Gale proposes the whole thing about the nut, and directly after he suggests that, Katniss has the discussion with him about like his morals. That conversation actually happens later in the book, but I think it makes sense to be here. This is also where in the book, Katniss imagines the nut avalanche and it reminds her of the day that their fathers died. And she actually has a full-on flashback to that day. The proceedings of the nut attack are skipped over in the movie. Versus in Mockingjay Part 1, we actually get saving the tributes when the book completely skips over that action, and it's because they're wanting to put something action-y at the end of the movie. Makes sense. In the speech that she gives to the refugees of District 2, she uses snow more than the capital that she uses in the book. The movie does focus more on Snow as an entity. In the movie, because we spend more time with him as an audience, Katniss's dialogue also focuses on him more, which also I actually think kind of adds to the whole situation of we shouldn't be hurting civilians, right? Like the people who are citizens of the Capitol are still of the Capitol. Let me know what you think. Do you think that that was a good change or a bad change? It's not super monumental. We get another new Snow scene of him seeing her get shot on camera, and he's just got like a normal suit on. Like every other time in this movie, everyone's wearing things that are pretty extravagant, and he is just wearing a normal suit. What's up? Also, what do we think the unbloomed rose that he is constantly wearing means? I wanted to look that up and everyone was like, oh, well, the significance is that Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like his grandmother has a rose garden. I'm like, no, like that's not what Suzanne Collins was writing about when she wrote this 10 years earlier. He also kills a minister here by poison, which reinforces the things that were introduced in the previous movie that he poisoned other people. And this like kind of naturally brings that back up, but it doesn't bring back up that like he's probably ill because he's drinking the poison and he just kind of looks tubercular the whole movie. We see the locket that Katniss has again, and it is still so fucking funny. This movie made so much money. They couldn't take pictures of these characters that look like they could have been real portraits taken because it's so obvious that these pictures are just production photos. They're wearing the outfits from The Reaping. So after Katniss gets shot, Joanna shows up and is wanting to take her IV stuff. I do believe that this scene is moved around a little bit. I could be wrong. But we only get basically 2 instances of Joanna in this movie versus she shows up more often in the book. Katniss goes to visit Peeta, and Peeta has the same conversation with her. He says he remembers the bread. He goes on about it in the movie in a way he does not go on about it in the book. And he like ends the conversation saying, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble if I wouldn't have thrown you the bread. And like, that is way more mean than what he said in the book. The wedding of Annie and Finnick is just a jump scare. There is no introduction to the idea that this is going to happen before this. Versus in the book, Plutarch's like, oh yeah, we're having a wedding, and she's like, holy shit, you're planning my wedding now? And he's like, not your wedding, bro. And then Plutarch and Coin fight about how extravagant or not extravagant the wedding should be, and I like that part. I do have to ask, canonically, where the fuck do all these plants come from? Where is this in District 13? What is this room? Also, where does Effie get her outfit from? Did she bring it with her when she was kidnapped? This is the other major instance of Joanna. There are pretty similar things that are discussed, but in the movie, Joanna says, don't you want to dance for Snow? In like a sarcastic way. And then in the book, she says, don't let Snow take dancing away from you. I really don't like the couple of times that the movie takes away heartfelt things away from Joanna because it happens at least twice to like big important lines. And Joanna
Unlike what happens in the book, she brings up that there's a medical supply shipment that is going to go out to the front lines and that she was going to steal some stuff, but instead she's going to help cover for Katniss so she can go to the front lines. In the books, Joanna and Katniss, in order to get to the front lines, have to go through a rigorous training regimen, which is concluded with that simulation that has their greatest weakness put into it. And instead, we have a conversation between Plutarch and Coin about how Katniss is always insubordinate. So that is the like Chekhov's gun of Katniss is not going to follow orders in book versus movie. Katniss hugs Prim so that we remember that we care about Prim, but also it's like she's saying goodbye, but she's not telling her, you know. Katniss shows up on the front lines and the salute is done to her again. I swear to God, the salute is not in Mockingjay. It should be. Like, I think inserting it into the movie is good. Paler shows up. She is the person who is in charge of the rebellion in District 8, and Girly Boss looks like she's from Star Wars. This is like the most Star Wars coat I have ever seen. Paler gives the announcement about the pods and the path that they're going to be going on. And from the map, we can see that from the very beginning, there are pods literally everywhere all over the Capitol, including directly right next to the presidential mansion. Versus in the book, they like evacuate the Capitol in waves. To me, in the movie, where are the citizens of the Capitol? If there are pods everywhere, and there are just pods around the civilians like all the time, the Capitol doesn't even do that in the books. We get introduced to Katniss's Star Squad, and what the fuck is Ted Wheeler doing here? The hell? He does nothing in this movie, by the way. Katniss joins the front lines at about 30 minutes into the movie, and their journey through the Capitol starts at about 37 minutes in. I'll do the percentages here of how that lines up with the book. There's a small detail of Peeta freaking out after the machine guns that go off, the first pod that they interact, the like second pod they interact with, the one that kills Boggs. Really good moment that lasts only a couple seconds, just really gets his trauma across. But literally, why the fuck would they think that those big ass machine guns only have one charge in them? I think that the tar, or I guess they call it the oil section, that pod is super duper memorable in the movie. In the movie, they end up like smashing a window, going up to the top floor of this building, and the oil stops just below the top floor. So like up the stairs and everything, it stops. They say there's a tar smell, but it is described as, quote, black oily matter spouts like a geyser from the street, billowing between the buildings, creating an impenetrable wall of darkness. It seems to be neither liquid nor gas, mechanical nor natural. Basically, in the book, they are able to like seal, the door seals enough that the liquid can't get in. So it's just like, okay, they were able to get away from it quickly enough. Versus in the movie, they like they get up there and they just so happen to design it so the liquid would only go so high. Yeah, it's not super realistic that the door closing is enough to hold off this oil, but I think it's less of a leap than like the oil just stopping right below their feet. Jennifer's wig is super noticeable in this scene. Oh my God. It's actually kind of funny to me that the Capitol has underground sanitation tunnels like it's fucking Disney World. But they figure out Katniss is alive and Snow is just like laughing. And honestly, this portrayal of him like smiling and laughing because the game is still on, so interesting. The Mutts start attacking them. Katniss using fire arrows in a very close space when any of her arrows she can just turn off, which I don't even know if she ever uses that ability. The action in this section of the movie, I did not find the easiest to follow. We get happy music when Finnick shows up and starts killing people and then immediately goes back to stressful. And then Finnick's death here is given way more attention than it ever does in the books. Katniss is barely able to see him when he dies. She sees him from far away. And in this, she not only is closest witness to seeing this, we get an extended fight scene where he gets to really fight people off and everything. I understand the purposes of not giving his death fanfare, but honestly, Katniss doesn't address it enough, even like emotionally. Some peacekeepers show up and they continue to have stormtrooper aim because, oh my god, they had complete line of sight to her and they have machine guns. What the fuck happens to this guy who gets raptured? What is that? What is that thing? My favorite part of the scene when Katniss like says his favorite color and everything is that she has this moment of thinking to herself, I need to be kinder to him. Like, I need to be him for him now because he does not have a him. And it's not in there because it's internal dialogue. The stay with me always bit has an added kiss in the movie. I get why it's there. It does feel forced, as does like every kiss in these movies. I'm gonna be real with you, except for like the very end. What Katniss does in the books is she holds his hands to the point of pain and says, stay with me. He says always, and we see his pupils contract. So like he's gotten past the tracker jacker stuff, which cool. This scene happens 367 pages into my copy of the book and an hour and 18 into this movie, which I did originally do the math wrong for this. I started doing the percentage of the way through this movie, forgetting that 2 movies. So it happens 81% of the way through the book, 77% of the way through the movie. I'll say the movies just generally take a more objective approach to storytelling. There are so many things that happen in the books that are supposed, that are conjecture, they're speculation on Katniss's part or another person's part. And because we start seeing the things from like Snow's points of view or other people who are just opposing her, we get objective truth. Also, I think it's pretty messed up that they added like water to the scene where Finnick dies. He gets dragged into the water and under the surface and starts getting eaten. That's fucked up, guys. Peeta has a little speech when they're hiding out with Tigress about like people's deaths meaning something if there's change. That doesn't happen in the book. Katniss cleans Peeta's wounds in both book and movie, and in both she mentions that you need to keep it clean in case of infection. In the book, he asks, real or not real, you said that to me in our first Hunger Games. Snow says all the people more than half away from the city should come to him and he will house them inside his mansion. How the fuck could he possibly do that? How big is this mansion and how few people live outside a half mile of the mansion? My having captions on turned off the captions. They do not give captions for Pollux's signing. I wonder why. Setting out to the capital after Tigress helps them is 395 pages into my book, which is 86% of the way through the book, 82% of the way through the movie. The sign-off with Peeta saying if we meet again, it'll be a different world is added by the movie. The disguises that they go into, I believe, are more involved in the book. In the movie, they just get big old coats. Like, you could at least, like, put makeup on them so people can't recognize them, like, at a moment's notice. Katniss and Gale are walking towards the mansion. They see guards, which fucking obviously, and they decide to turn around and start walking the other way of the crowd, as if that's not completely way more obvious, and wouldn't people immediately pick up on that? Which they kind of seem to, I'm not sure. But the entire crowd gets down to the ground like way more quickly than I think an actual crowd could. Katniss and Gale hide in front of I think at the front or back of an armored vehicle, and then the other side of it gets exploded, so it starts going up and it's going to fall on them. And the second there is an explosion, the two of them bolt immediately away from the truck. And I'm just like, that is like the most choreographed stunt in this entire movie, in the entire movie series probably. Like, this does not look real remotely. The parachutes go off and we hear little murmurs of people in the crowd going, gifts from the Capitol. That doesn't make any sense. You are the Capitol as well. Like, this is a moment where it would make sense to say gifts from Snow. The bomb happens. The fire effect after the bomb that kills Prim sucks. I thought this movie had money. And this happens 406 pages into the book, 137 into the movie, meaning 89% of the way through the book, 84% of the way through the movie. We show up in the mansion. I do not remember this Effie fit even a little bit, but somehow Katniss is basically fine after surviving a firebomb, which took out her sister who was like 10 feet away from her. In the book, consistently, when bad things happen to people, even with the wild technology of the Capitol, they sustain injuries. They get scarred. They lose limbs. They become handicapped. Really, the only permanent injury that we see is BT going into a wheelchair. We don't even know that that's going to be permanent. Like, the fact that Peeta is not an amputee anymore. Also, like, in book 2, we briefly mentioned that Peeta's an amputee, but we really don't talk about that again. So both book and movie kind of glaze over that. But, like, book does not glaze over how injured Katniss is. Katniss is going up to Snow in the garden, and her wig, again, looks terrible here. Gale comes up to her and is like, I didn't come see you because you'll never forgive me. And he looks sad, but I don't think Liam Hemsworth could cry on command if he tried. He looks like he's trying, and he can't because he sucks. If they picked a person who looked like they had a bone of empathy in their body, maybe I wouldn't hate this version of Gale as much. So we have the meeting of the tributes, and Coin announces that she is president in the interim. She does not say that in the book. She is just going to be the president. Also, the entire setup of Plutarch having manipulated Coin throughout the movies more so than he does in the books does actually bring into question whether this is Coin's idea or if it's Plutarch, the game maker's idea. I think it aligns with both of them, but it definitely brings that into question in a way that the books don't. To correct myself, I think earlier in these videos, I said that Snow's granddaughter was made up by the movie. She is not. Snow having a granddaughter at all is mentioned by Joanna in the book at this round table. However, any time that we see her is in those snow scenes that are entirely made up. The fact that she has a Katniss braid, like literally anything about her made up by the movie. We get another Effie fit. I have to show off the costuming of this movie because they really only got to shove it into the last like 20 minutes. I'd like to point out, for one, that the vote yes for the Capitol Games and Katniss shooting Coin happen within 1 page of each other. So that is how quickly we get that turnaround in the book, versus in the movie, there's a lot of fanfare leading up and like a speech added in between these two scenes. We have Katniss marching with a ton of people. Interesting. I also was like, I have to look up if this does take place on the Avenue of Tributes. She's so good at writing end of chapter lines because I always know exactly where I am when I get to the end of a chapter here. This is not the roomy stage before the training center, but the narrow terrace in front of the president's mansion. So they do have this happen in front of the president's mansion versus the Avenue of Tributes. When we see Philip Seymour Hoffman at the execution and he doesn't say anything, it's just close up on his face, I realized, oh shit, Philip Seymour Hoffman died while filming this movie. And so I looked up, where was Philip Seymour Hoffman CGI'd in the movie? He's not. I thought he was CGI'd in. That's on me, fam. No, they cut, he had 2 scenes of dialogue left, so they just gave his dialogue to other people. We'll talk about it later. When Katniss is going to kill Snow, they have this Doctor Who-ass music playing. Who put that there? What the fuck? Coin ends this speech that is added by the movie with saying to Katniss, "May your aim be as true as your heart is pure," which is such an interesting line. You could take that both ways, I think. You could take that as may her aim be as true as her heart is pure, meaning the right thing to do is to kill Coin, like when you're talking about like an upper text level. Or maybe in this, we're saying that Katniss's heart isn't pure because she changes what her aim is. I think it's the first one, right? But like, I think it's interesting to think about it both ways. In the movie, Snow is explicitly killed by a mob because they have the public there and they just rush him and just beat him to death. Again, in the book, it is left unknown. Plutarch's expression at the end when Coin is killed. What is he thinking? That was just such an interesting little facial expression he made. Instead of Katniss having a full mental breakdown in which she tries to take her own life multiple times, and she left in essentially like a little psych ward room for a while, she just kind of like steps into a different room, and Haymitch reads a letter from Plutarch, which, of course, if you could not tell, is actually a line that was supposed to be Plutarch's, which makes way more sense. It really undermines the amount of trauma that Katniss has gone through, because that's such a different feeling scene in the book than the rest of the books. This moment where she in the movie, in the book, she attempts to kill herself with the pill, and Peeta stops her, but like she does not stop trying and has a full mental break. Haymitch and Katniss are going back, and Haymitch for some reason kisses Effie on the mouth. Why? I understand this is a ship, I don't care. I think I hate every kiss in this series. I'm so squeamish. She goes back. Buttercup is unbelievably unperturbed after she throws multiple glasses at him. There's just like silent scenes where her and Haymitch are living there. She comes back from hunting. She sees Peeta in the little garden in Victor's village. She comes up to him from behind and goes, "Peeta?" And he goes, "Hey, the fuck?" Shut the fuck up, actually. Then immediately after, Peeta is reading a letter from Annie. That this makes sense. But it's really weird that we have these like two letters read out back to back, and it's very clear that the letter was the second letter from Annie was intended to be in the movie. And the reason they did a letter from Plutarch is because they already established that they're going to do a letter later with Annie. It just feels weird that it happens 2 times so close together. The rest of this ending before the epilogue is vague in the book. We don't really get scenes, we just get her describing the fact that they emotionally grow closer together and sort of the journey that she got to mentally in order to be like, yes, Peeta is the person I want to be with. And in the movie instead, it's a visual medium. Quiet is something that's important here. It shows kind of the piece away from what we've been seeing for the rest of the movie. And so Katniss, as has been so important to them and actually reinforced by the movies in Mockingjay Part 1, the important thing to them is like being each other's safe space, so she goes to sleep in the same bed as him. And that is where we get the "you love me real or not real" scene, versus it's not really a scene in the book. Katniss does not look any older in the epilogue. Katniss having to talk to the baby is cute. I kind of like it, but her dialogue here does not feel as natural as it is just a thought in her head. That is something that the movies struggle with to begin with. We do not talk about at all people restarting District 12. We only see Katniss, Haymitch, and Peeta there, and we do not talk at all about the meadow being turned into a mass graveyard, which is part of the like whole thing about the epilogue. The last like hour of this movie, I was like, I keep checking how long the movie is, and I kept being like, dang, they're really dragging this out. It turns out there's 12 minutes of credits. So that was Mockingjay Part 2. And that means we have come to the conclusion of my reread of The Hunger Games. What have we thought? I really do enjoy the movies pretty evenly. I think the first one's a little bit hard to watch because of the low budget, but from there on out, I did really enjoy it. I think I would struggle to watch Mockingjay Part 2 as a standalone movie, but I think I like Mockingjay Part 1 more than other people do. As for the books, I think my love for them is pretty even. I have said it before, the first book I think is the best one. I think it's fairly flawless. There was the most for me to get from it, like on a word per word basis. Even though I think there are flaws with Mockingjay and Catching Fire, I don't care enough to split hairs to say like, oh, I like one better than the other, especially because Mockingjay is so different from the other books. I'm not one of the people who really cares that the formula was changed. It almost suffered a little bit by trying to stick to the formula outside of it being similar. I have been loving my reread. I'm so curious to see what I'm going to think of the next 2 of the prequels, and I'm going to see you in 2 more months when I do that. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you made it this far. Let me know what you thought of book versus movie. Do you have anything that I missed? Or what is your opinion on the series as a whole? Which one's your favorite? Books and movies. And if you don't have anything to say, find some sort of bird emoji to leave me in honor of Mockingjay, of course. If you'd like to find me anywhere else on the internet, you can find me at the links in the description, including all the bookish services I use. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, including finding out when my Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes video is coming out, you should make sure to hit subscribe. I would love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.